Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hello and welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. I am so excited today. Today we're going to radiate healing with Mark Anthony, JD, the psychic explorer and psychic lawyer, who is a world-renowned psychic medium, Oxford-educated attorney, near-death experience researcher, paranormal expert, and legal analyst who appears internationally on TV and radio and also here on my little podcast, and headlines at conferences and expos. Now, the psychic explorer may be found lecturing at an Ivy League university about quantum physics one day, and the next off to mystical locations in remote corners of the world to explore ancient ruins and supernatural phenomena. Mark is a featured columnist for Best Holistic Life magazine and author of 3 best-selling books. His latest, The Afterlife Frequency, is what we're going to be focusing on today and is a riveting story-driven exploration taking you around the globe from the cosmic to the subatomic into the human soul itself. The Afterlife Frequency has been endorsed by the world's top survival of consciousness scientists and designated by prettyprogressive.com, I think that's right up my alley, as one of the top books about faith in God, and it has been submitted for a Pulitzer Prize. My gosh, Mark, I'm so excited to have you on here. When do you sleep?
I do my best. You know, I look at it like this, and this is probably what I got from my parents. My parents were the most motivated people, and they always instilled in me that you have to make each day count. You have to accomplish something, you know, and it's funny because, you know, I travel a lot around the world and people say, oh, you went to Costa Rica. Did you like hang out on the beach? And it's like, no, but I walked along the beach and then did a hike in the rainforest. And then we're off to, you know, I'm not the type of guy that's just going to hang out around the pool. Okay. I want to do things. I want to explore. I want to understand. And so that certainly carries on into my work. And I think you're a lot like that too, Christy, when we were talking is, you know, each day that we're alive is a gift. And it's though some days it doesn't feel like that, particularly, let's say, in the wake of the passing of a loved one. Okay, that doesn't feel like a gift when you're just crushed by grief. But even in that darkness, we have the ability to do something positive. And so that's what has always been part of my life.
Right. Now, you're a 4th generation psychic, from what I understand.
Yes.
How was this gift addressed in your family?
I'm smiling because I'm the first person that ever went public with it, although it wasn't exactly unknown in the communities that we lived in.
Right.
My mother's grandmother, which would be my maternal great-grandmother, her name was Giovanna. And that part of the family hailed from Italy, and they came over to the U.S. in the early 20th century. And Giovanna was known in the Italian community of North New Jersey and New York City as the woman who knows things. And officials from the Catholic Church used to meet with her. I mean, we're talking everything from nuns all the way up to cardinals. And they used to like treat her as a woman of great respect and knowledge for her psychic abilities. In fact, in 2016, PBS did a 2-night special called The Italian Americans, and they actually did an entire segment on Giovanna. And they referenced her psychic abilities. And I remember when I was watching it, you know, and on the commercials, you know, I'm calling my cousins, you know, we're all like calling and texting each other, like, did you see that? And then on my dad's side of the family, they were very conservative Pennsylvania Baptists. In fact, my great-great-grandfather, his name was Judson Curtis. He founded a church in Pennsylvania up in the mountains. And my dad had 4 siblings, 3 sisters and a brother. And one of his sisters, Marjorie, was a medium like he was, as well as their mother, Isabel, and his maternal grandmother, Grace. So I've been able to track these abilities back to like the 1890s on both sides of the family.
Yeah.
It appears to be a genetic trait, what's known as a recessive genetic trait. It's like being left-handed. It's genetic, whether or not you're right-handed or left-handed. 90% of the people in the world are right-handed. 10% are left-handed, and that gene, that trait can skip a few generations. But when you have 2 parents with the same genetic, recessive genetic trait, then the likelihood of one of their children having that trait increases. So here I am.
There you are. When did you first realize that you possessed this trait?
I was about 3.5 years old. The really interesting thing about my childhood is I have a very clear memory of events from the time I was about 18 months old. People say, oh, you can't remember anything before the age of 5. It's like, oh, but I can. And I remember my first memory, and this isn't a psychic memory, and it's funny because I really haven't talked about this very much. So I guess there's something about you, Christy, that makes me want to talk about this. My first coherent memory, I was sitting in a high chair and I was banging on, the place there, the high chair with the little tray in front. I was banging on it. And both of my parents were leaning over and they were talking to me, telling me how much they loved me. I mean, when I think of that, I'm just so overwhelmed. That's my first memory, so I am so grateful that I have that ability to recall that, and that I had parents that really loved me so very much. And then when I was about 3.5 years old, I started having my invisible friends, which, is not unusual for a toddler, but when mommy and daddy can see those friends as well. And I'll never forget mom's reaction. It's like, oh, he's got it. And dad's was like, oh, he's got it.
I can imagine that. Oh my God.
Well, yeah, and the thing is, my dad was a Navy SEAL, and then after he got out of the Navy, he went into aerospace. So he was a Navy SEAL and a NASA engineer. This is a real no-nonsense guy. Mom was a commercial illustrator. Mom was an artist. Okay, so she was kind of like, in my first book, Never Letting Go, I described my mother as kind of a combination of Shirley MacLaine, Elizabeth Taylor, Lucille Ball, and as my dad said, Joe Louis, the fighter, all kind of rolled into one, and she was just a whole lot of fun, and but when I was about 6 months after I started seeing spirits, and I'm not going to go into it because it takes too long. Plus, I write about it extensively in the afterlife frequency. I had a near-death experience where I went into cardiopulmonary failure. So by the time I was 4, I was seeing spirits. I had an NDE. And, I'd been through, some pretty harrowing experiences.
Right.
I remember being in a tornado, which was really, really something. In fact, I wrote an article about that that's coming out in the September issue of Best Holistic Life magazine. And I call it Instant Karma, CAR-MA. I'm not going to tell you about the story. People are going to have to subscribe, which you can get a free subscription to Best Holistic Life magazine. Yeah, free online subscription. It's bestholisticlife.com. And it's a wonderful magazine. It's right up our alley, Christy, because you have people in different aspects of holistic life. And that's the theme of today's show is healing, and leading a holistic lifestyle emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually is a healthy way to live.
I agree. Absolutely. Everything goes better with awareness and everything goes better with spirit. So yes, living that holistic lifestyle is just where it's at. And so, when did you first start to realize that you could do something professional with this gift? When did you start bringing that in?
The reason I'm laughing is when it was always there. Okay. But I remember my dad telling me, don't talk about it. Okay. Yeah. Don't talk about it. Just talk about it to your mom and I. And there's a reason for that. But people can find out about what that reason is if they read my second book, Evidence of Eternity. Okay. Because it's something horrible that happened to his sister because of her ability. So they wanted to keep it quiet. Yeah. So it was always there. But then when I started practicing law, my first job, I was a prosecutor. Now, it's funny because a lot of people don't understand what a prosecutor is. A prosecuting attorney works for the state. I was working for the state of Florida. And we're the ones that, when people get arrested and they're charged with crimes, we're the ones that have to bring forth the evidence to convict them, assuming that we are convinced of their guilt. Well, when you're a young prosecutor, you get stuck with first appearances. Now, first appearances, when someone gets arrested, they have to be brought in front of a judge within 24 hours. And so, when you're a young attorney, fresh out of law school, they stick you on weekend duty. So I'd have to go to the jail and, people are arrested and they're hung in jail and they'd bring them in and I'd be there with my co-counsel, and we would, say whether or not this person should have bail and if they should have bail, what it should be. And then, of course, the defense, usually a public defender, the defense attorney would argue the contrary, and then the judge makes the decision. So people would come in, and before I ever looked at the reports, I'd go sex offender, burglar, wife beater, alcoholic, cocaine dealer, and my co-counsels go, how do you know that? Then they're looking at the reports going, you're right. And, the thing is, if you look at all these people, people have been in the drunk tank all night, all have a grungy, rough look. And so it got to be a game that Mark knows stuff about people. So before they'd show me the report, and we weren't doing this on the speaker, it'd be just me and my co-counsel. Right. It got to be a thing like, see if Mark can figure out what the person's charged with before we show him the report. And I had like a 95% or even greater accuracy rate. And so I started getting this reputation for this guy kind of knows stuff, and particularly in trial. And I wrote a story. In fact, my first book, Never Letting Go, starts with this. It was jury selection. And now by this time, I was working in private practice and I was a defense attorney. So now I was defending people. I was representing this, big bruiser, and he'd gotten into a barroom brawl and he, beat up this other big bruiser. So usually what happens in barroom brawls is the loser files charges. Okay. My client, being the winner, was the one that got arrested. And so we're doing what's called voir dire, or jury selection. And that's where they, the bailiffs bring in a group of people, and we, both sides, first the judge, then the prosecution, and then the defense, we get to question everybody to see if they have any biases. And then that's how we select a jury. You pop off the people that, you exclude the people that have biases, and then you get a jury of 6 people plus 1 alternate. Well, Christy, I kept getting drawn to this one woman. And I kept feeling a female spiritual presence around her. Wow. And it was getting really intense. Okay. And I kept feeling this tightening around my throat. And I'm like, okay, this is not the time to be doing this. So now it's time for me to question the prospective jurors. And so I led off with, has anyone here ever been, or a family member, been a victim of a violent crime? Her hand goes right up, the tears shoot out of her eyes. And she said, a year ago, my sister was in a foreign country when an escaped mental patient strangled her, then dismembered her body and threw her in a garbage can like she was trash. And this woman, and like, I'm standing there like, you know, and they didn't teach me in law school how to deal with this one. And my client's like, dude, what are you doing? And the courtroom was like, even the prosecutor was so stunned, you know, wasn't objecting. And all of a sudden I start seeing the image of this woman's sister getting stronger and stronger. And if you want to find out what happens, you're going to have to get my book, Never Letting Go.
I love how you set these up, Mark. That's awesome.
No, but I mean, it's true. I mean, it's like, oh my God, you know, and these things happen because people, and you probably get this too. Oh, do you just walk around flinging out readings at people?
No.
It's unethical, isn't it?
It is unethical.
And see, that's what I have problems with some of these TV shows where somebody will be sitting there eating lunch and the medium runs up, hi, I'm a medium, blah, 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 and they throw a reading at the person. First off, that's phony. And here's why. There's a whole camera crew with the medium. Secondly, that person can't be on camera unless they sign an authorization allowing that. Third, all the people in the background whom you see have to sign authorizations. Fourth, when you have 5 different camera angles, perfect lighting, perfect sound, close-ups, perfect makeup, that takes like 6 or 7 hours to film that, okay? So the idea of going and flinging a reading at a person in a pizza parlor, it may make for good entertainment value, but that isn't legitimate mediumship, nor is it right for someone to just go up to a person that you don't know and deliver a message. That's like saying, going up to someone with a pair of pliers, prying their mouth open and yanking a tooth out. Okay. Right. It's like, oh, you need a root canal. You know, it's like, no, you don't do things like that to people.
That is low integrity. You know, I like to say that just because I'm also a professional medium.
Yes.
That just because I have a key to somebody's house, I'm not going to go in without them knowing.
Exactly. Because the thing is, that person's there at the pizza parlor or the sandwich shop or whatever because they want to have, you know, something to eat. They're not there because they want to deal with the passing of a loved one. See, spirit communication, yes, we can pick up on their spirits. But just because you can do something doesn't mean that this is the right time to do it. Okay. And so spirit communication, it's like there's these fraud accounts going around on Instagram. You know, there's all of us have been subject to it where these creepy fraud people direct message someone saying they're me or some other medium and, oh, I have a message for you. Well, first off, I would never do anything that sleazy. I would never do anything sleazy, period. And that's unethical. If people want a reading, they know how to get in touch with me by visiting my website, afterlifefrequency.com. Okay. Plus, somebody has to be open to spirit communication and want to do that. That, you know, they have to want the contact.
Exactly. They have to initiate it, right? And that way it would be ethical. Well, let's switch over to your book, The Afterlife Frequency, nominated for a Pulitzer, for crying out loud, best-selling book. You just keep seeming to like gain momentum with each subsequent book. So why did you set out to write The Afterlife Frequency? What did you want to share with people about that?
When I was 8 years old, I was looking at the stars with my dad, and he was a NASA engineer. And Dad worked with astronauts. So I thought my dad was the coolest guy in the world. And, you know, I was always a good student, and we were talking about how far the stars were. And Dad said to me, there are no such things as mysteries, Mark. There's only questions for which we do not yet have the answer. And if enough research, enough funding, and enough dedication goes into any question, eventually we'll find the answer, he said. And it's going to be based on science, on physics. and that really, really hung on, I hung on to that. And then years later, I wrote my first book, Never Letting Go. And that's a whole story, how that came into being. And then when I was on the Never Letting Go book tour, people kept asking me questions about reincarnation and whether animals have souls. And is there a scientific basis for this? So that led to me writing Evidence of Eternity. But the afterlife frequency, I wanted to go even further. And so the subtitle of the afterlife frequency, and I have a copy of it here, is The Scientific Proof of Spiritual Contact and How That Awareness Will Change Your Life. And so I'm explaining that the different forms of spirit communication, not just mediumship, that you're a medium, I'm a medium, people come to us for connections, but mediumship, direct contact, whether, let's say, somebody has a visitation in a dream that feels real and you wake up and you know that you just spoke to your loved one. What about a near-death experience? Very heavily documented for thousands of years. And as an NDEer and an NDE researcher, also shared death experiences. Now, this is a biggie. This is the new frontier in near-death experiences. It's when somebody is in the process of actively dying and people in close physical proximity, family members, friends, hospice workers, healthcare workers, start to see spirits. And these people are not mediums. And what's happening there is the vibrational frequency overlap between that person's soul as they're getting ready to leave their body. So there are several different forms of spirit communication, and they're all explainable on the basis of quantum physics. But I'm going to give a spoiler alert. My book is not a dry, boring treatise. I spent enough time in law school and the practice of law reading boring books, boring legal opinions. I'm not going to inflict that on anyone. So I explain these concepts, but then I illustrate it with stories, fast moving. Some are funny, some are really intense, because that's life. Sometimes life is funny, sometimes it's devastating, sometimes it's like, how did that even happen? And so that's why I decided to write The Afterlife Frequency. But if you'll indulge me, I'm with my friend Billy in Thailand. And the thing about Billy is we met when we were 11 years old. Okay. Now, this story is not in The Afterlife Frequency. And I purposely didn't put it in because I knew I'd be discussing this to tell people why I wrote The Afterlife Frequency. And we were both raised in the Catholic faith, but he was an atheist. And so starting in high school, we had these discussions about the afterlife and the existence of God. And it was this ongoing debate, almost an argument, but an intellectual one that, never got all, confrontational. He was like my brother. I mean, we went to junior high, high school, college together. After college, I went to law school. He went to Asia. And he had an aptitude for languages. He learned how to speak Japanese, Thai, Indonesian, and he was pretty good with Cantonese, a form of Chinese. And so he was the perfect person to travel through Asia with. And, we'd always be at these Buddhist temples. And of course, I'm talking to all the monks and all this. And he's like, I still don't believe in God, but he goes, you get me thinking, and I don't know how you do that psychic thing. And I said, well, why don't you believe? He said, because there's no technology, there's no science that can prove this. So one of the happiest days of my life, and let's see if I can get through this without getting all choked up, was when he met this beautiful woman in Japan years later. They asked me to perform their wedding ceremony because I was at the time I was a notary public, and I'll never forget. It was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful spring day, and it was at this cabana overlooking the ocean. And there I am standing there, in the role of a minister, and everybody I loved was there and alive. My parents were there, his parents, all of our friends from college and high school, my fraternity brothers. And there's my best friend and my new best friend, and I'm performing their wedding ceremony. And, when you look back on life, happiness isn't some swimming pool that we jump into and like, I'm happy. It's looking back on a tapestry, and each memory and each experience is a thread. And when the happy threads outnumber the unhappy ones and the difficult ones, then you had a good life. Okay, you had a happy life. And that was one of those sparkling moments in my life. Mm. And then a few years later, his wife called me and she said, he's on life support. Billy was suffering from depression and was having an issue with alcoholism. And he did a major drug overdose. He was taking care of his father who was dying of cancer, and he got into his father's morphine. And I'll never forget, she said, they want me, she's Japanese. And she goes, Mark, I don't know who to call. I have no one else in America to talk to. She goes, they want me to kill him. I can't do it. And I said, then don't do it. I said, don't let the doctors pressure you. Don't do it. You're not ready yet. I never regretted that, because 3 hours later, he expired on his own. And if she would have ordered life support removed, she never would have forgiven herself. So then I get the message, and I'm devastated. In a year and a half or a year later, Never Letting Go had come out, and I was on the Never Letting Go tour, and I was at Estes Park in Colorado at the Stanley Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
And Stanley Hotels, and they do paranormal investigations as part of all this. And I had just spoken, and then I was on the in the conference room, and I was at my table autographing books, and my manager Rocky, she was walking around looking at all the other exhibitors, and there was one guy there. He was exhibiting the what do they call it? The spirit box, the spirit box scanner. And all of these devices are there because they had a lot of paranormal investigators. And so Rocky's walking by this table, and all of a sudden she hears, get Mark, and she stops and she looks at this thing, and the investigator said, did you hear that? And then it says again, get Mark. And Rocky's like, oh my God. And he goes, do you think he means your Mark Anthony? So all of a sudden I hear, Mark, get over here. And I'm looking up, and there's this crowd forming. So I get up and I run over to this table, and I'm like, what is it? What? And when I walk up, I hear, dude. And I stopped in my tracks and I looked at it, and he goes, love you, bro. It was his voice. And I looked at Rocky because she knew him. She goes, Mark, that was Billy. And she's crying, and the tears are coming down my eyes. And I'm looking at this, look, I'm a medium. I'm the one used to, freaking people out doing this. But I heard his voice, and the investigator, the guy selling the stuff, goes, this is highly unusual. It called Mark by name, not once, but twice. And I heard this. And then see, because we're from the surfing culture of East Coast Florida, and he always called me dude, like answer the phone, and he go, dude, and the last thing that he did say to me was, love you, bro, in this world. I remember when I saw him, he hugged me, and he was, I love you, bro. And so that's what came through. And so at first I thought that this was just, fantastic. I mean, and it was. But one of the concepts that I write about in the Afterlife Frequency is called the unfolding. And that's when after the reading, think of the readings like a flower. It blooms, blossoms, unfolds. And it can take hours, days, weeks, or longer for the full meaning of a reading to make sense to you. And then it dawned on me. The atheist who told me there was no science and no technology to communicate with spirits or detect them, what did he choose to communicate with me but was science and technology? And that got the wheels rolling, that I have got to do the research. I've got to, and it took me years to write this book, but I've got to be able to explain to people that spirit communication, whether it's through a medium, a visitation, a near-death experience, a deathbed vision, an out-of-body experience, a shared death experience, is not fantasy. It's not hocus pocus, nor is it paranormal or supernatural, but it's a normal part of nature, and that it can be explained on the basis of science, specifically quantum physics.
That is amazing. Well, yes, those of us in this world, we know this to be true, but I love that you did the research and put it pen to paper. So what is that frequency? What is that afterlife frequency? Yes, it's quantum physics, but can you break it down a little bit more?
Absolutely. Everything is made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which are made of subatomic particles known as electrons, protons, and neutrons. All right, we've all learned that in science, okay?
Right.
But those particles are made of yet a smaller particle known as a quantum, ergo the term quantum physics. And that particle is pure electromagnetic energy. And so everything at the most basic subatomic level is electromagnetic energy. That means you, me, the air we're breathing, the radio waves that the show is being broadcast on, the light of the sun, the surface of Mars, are all at the basic level electromagnetic energy. That's why people of near-death experiences talk about coming out of the experience feeling, we're all interconnected. Well, yeah, because what's happening is they're experiencing that quantum level. Every great spiritual teacher for thousands of years, from the times of ancient India, China, Egypt, through Zoroaster, Buddha, Moses, Confucius, Jesus, Muhammad, Lao Tzu, Native American spirituality, all the way up to today, always describes God in terms of light. Now, isn't it interesting that light is the only form of electromagnetic energy visible to the human eye? So I developed the concept known as the electromagnetic soul. And I described this on Gaia TV with George Norrie and on Coast to Coast and on numerous television shows. And certainly I went very deeply into it in the afterlife frequency. And so the electromagnetic soul is a term that I developed to describe what we really are, which is a soul, a spirit. In psychology, they refer to as consciousness. So that's the who and what we are, which is pure electromagnetic energy. And we know from the laws of physics that energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transferred from one form to another. So that when we die, think of your EMS, okay, your electromagnetic soul. Your brain's like a computer hard drive. It didn't create your electromagnetic soul. It merely hosts it, just the way your computer hard drive hosts your operating system. And so when your hard drive brain crashes, that EMS is like a drop of water that plunges into this eternal sea known as the collective consciousness. You still maintain your identity because you take you with you when you die, okay, but now you're energetically linked to this vast knowledge of the collective consciousness. And so the afterlife frequency, that is the collective consciousness, what we also call the other side, because everything has different vibrations. All right, we get to the quantum, but see this pen, it's vibrating on a subatomic level, but its vibration is different than my vibration, okay? But yes, we're at the subatomic level, all the same component, but it's the vibration that makes things different, makes us alive. And so our vibration, as we're housed in these corporeal entities, these bodies, is lower and slower than a spirit's, which is on a higher vibration. Think of it like this. We live in AM radio. Okay, we have amplitude, we have modulation, we have energy. Okay, it's an electromagnetic field of energy is AM radio. And the other side is FM radio, frequency modulation, which vibrates at a much higher frequency. So you have two energetic systems that exist parallel to one another, and spirit communication, whether it's an NDE, a shared death experience, a mediumship, or direct visitation, deathbed vision, is when the vibration of our AM radio, our material world frequency, and the afterlife frequency, they bring their vibration down and you get a frequency match. And that is how and why we are able to communicate with the other side.
Did you know that Radiate Wellness is more than just a podcast? That's right. We're also a comprehensive, holistic wellness practice. Find out about our services, practitioners, and upcoming events at radiatewellnesscommunity.com. While you're there, visit our podcast page to read more about our great guests and even donate to the podcast. If you like our podcast, you can help in other ways as well, like subscribe or follow us wherever you're listening right now. Tell a friend, a family member, or a coworker about the great content you find here. And if you wouldn't mind, please give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, or a positive review. Sounds like a small thing, but it really helps. You might like to know about our Facebook communities while we're at it. We have a free community, the Radiate Wellness Community, on Facebook for news and great free content. Our subscribers group is Radiate U, as in the letter U, but also, well, you. There you'll find curated replays of past classes, guest interviews, and more. And now, back to our podcast and back to our guest. Absolutely. Thank you so much for breaking that down, because I think we all can understand frequency in those terms. Now, so in the instance of a near-death experience, which you are an NDEer, as you said, and I want to hear your story, but so then what happens with our energy? It's here, it's there, it comes back. Yeah. What are the mechanics of that?
Well, with an NDE, okay, think of like here we are in a near-death experience for people who may not be familiar is when people die and their consciousness, okay, leaves the body and they observe things. We call it veridical perception. In other words, veridical means accurate perception. Okay. And they've been studied and reported for thousands of years and on all over the world. And there are similarities between them. And I'm giving you a crash course. My book goes much, much deeper into it. But basically, it's like, we're tethered to a rubber band and we're like, we get pulled right up to that FM frequency, that other side, and we can glimpse it. There's a sensation of going through a tunnel into the light, seeing loved ones who have passed, encountering the divine, that all loving, beautiful white light energy that people refer to as God. And even the word God is too limiting for this. And then you come back. Okay, that's why it's a near-death experience, because you get as near to death as you can. And of course, there's skeptics and cynics who claim that this is merely a function of a dying brain. But I debunk those theories in the afterlife frequency. And it's not just because oh, no, that's not what happens. I give actual scientific reasons to refute all of that.
Good. Yes. So can you tell us a bit about your own near-death experience?
I actually want people to read about that. And here's why. Because it introduces a key story and a key element, which is germane to what comes next. See, with my books, I had this one lady, she, when my book came out, she knew that her story was in it. She goes, well, I went right to that story. And she didn't understand it because, you have to start from page 1, because in each chapter, I introduce a concept that you need to understand that will explain the subsequent concepts, and it was funny because she said, she understood her story, but she said, well, I thought it would be longer. And it's like, well, it was a story that was illustrating a point. My whole book was not about her. Okay.
Exactly.
It was a very, very nice lady, and it was an extremely important story. It was about, I was doing a reading for her, and this young man came through, and I started describing him, and she goes, I know who that is. And she gave, and she said, but I never met him. And I said, what? Her job in the military was making sure that bodies of sailors, she was in the Navy, were shipped to the families. And that was her first case, and she never forgot about it. And he came through and explained the very mysterious circumstances surrounding his death.
Oh,
and
wow.
So it was pretty heavy. And that chapter, I believe, is in the chapter on the unfolding, because a lot of times you don't understand, what does this mean at the time of the reading, and you don't know. I'll give an example that just happened to me recently. I was doing a reading for this gentleman, and his father's spirit came through, and I kept getting two snakes. So my interpretation was, maybe there was something, maybe they had a story involving a snake or two snakes, or it could be a reference to what's called the caduceus, the medical symbol of the staff with the two snakes on it. That's my interpretation. But the thing is, what I think doesn't matter. It's what the information means to the recipient. And he said, Mark, he goes, I have a feeling it's Native American. Okay. Now, it's funny because there's some mediums that everything's Native American. It's like, I'm not one of those psychics that pulls out Native American stuff unless that's, what I'm getting. But I said, well, why do you say that? He said, well, my father was 100% Sioux, full-blooded Sioux, Sioux nation. He said, but I never met him. He died when I was a baby. He goes, but that's my feeling. I go, okay, let's go with that, and then we'll move on. So the next day he contacted me, and he sent me in an email a picture from a page in a book that he and his wife took a picture of in the Sioux language. Sioux means two snakes. Now, I didn't know that. He didn't know that. And that's what the beauty. I love it when people go, oh, you're cold reading. Okay, really? So I'm going to fling out two snakes, hoping to get a hit.
Right.
And his father was full-blooded Sioux, and Sioux means two snakes in the Sioux language, which I will admit I do not speak. Okay.
Right.
And so that's why in spirit communication, we can't just jump to conclusions.
Right.
You get the evidence, and then even if it doesn't make sense right away, don't worry about it. The reading's like a flower, blooms, blossoms, unfolds. It can take hours, days, weeks, and longer before things make sense. And that's what happened in the story of that young pilot. There was so many questions surrounding his passing, and he came through and answered enough of them. She didn't know what a lot of things meant. She contacted his family, and they said, oh my God, the stuff that came through is right on point. Because he brought up stuff about his family, his brother and his mother that certainly I didn't know, and certainly that this woman didn't know.
That's always amazing when that happens. And that's happened to me several times too. And it's like, I don't know why this is important, but it's important to somebody. And then it comes through. So, that's a question. Why do maybe it doesn't seem that insignificant, but there can be details that are not tremendously meaningful at the time. So why does that type of information come through?
I think initially when a spirit is working with us, they're going to give us information that may initially seem trivial. You also have to realize they're tuning into us, we're tuning into them. And one of the key components of let me explain. I was trying to figure out, how do I explain to people who are not mediums how they can have a mediumistic experience, okay? Because not everyone's a medium, but spirits are capable of communicating, and we're capable of receiving it. And here I was in my office, and I was like literally banging my head against the wall. Nothing was making sense. I just couldn't write it. I had that horrible writer's block. So I thought, all right, I'll go for a walk. So I live near the ocean. So I'm walking down my driveway, and I'm headed toward the beach. And all of a sudden I get cold chills and tingles. Now, that's why a lot of people think spirit communication is scary, because it's the same physical sensation as the fight or flight response. But I've done this long enough, growing up with it, that I know, okay, these are spirits, and I'm getting pulled in the opposite direction to go for a walk on a bike path that does not lead to the beach. So I go, okay, so I'm walking on the bike path. It's around midday, and all of a sudden I see these two objects glowing in the light, and I walk up to them, and it's a penny and a nickel. So I bend over and I pick them up. And just as I'm about to pick them up, I hear my mother's voice. My parents were both in spirit. It's bad luck if it's heads down. And I start laughing, because that's the Italian side of the family. We have a superstition for, and don't walk under a ladder. Watch out for that black cat. For God's sakes, don't drop a mirror. And so I'm laughing. And then I hear my dad's voice. It's money. Grab it. So I grab this nickel and this penny, and I'm holding them in my hand. Like, oh, 6 cents. And I go, wait a second.
Wait.
Whoa, 6 cents. And then the cold chills and tingles intensified. And I knew Mom and Dad were trying to get a message through. And I go, okay, I recognize this. I'm accepting this. What is it?
You've got my attention.
All of a sudden, in my mind's eye, I get an image of my dad standing in the ocean up to his waist, holding this blue canvas raft. Okay. He was a scuba diver, swimming instructor, Navy SEAL. We used to go body surfing or, wave riding with this. I go, raft. And then I hear my parents in unison recognize signs from spirits, accept the contact is real, feel it without overthinking it, and trust the message. And I go, raft. And I ran back to my house, writer's block on, words just fly out of me, the raft technique. And so my parents walked me through it. I recognized the signs from the cold chills and tingles. And then when I got the 6 cents, they were talking about the 6th sense. Mm-hmm. I accepted it as real. Now it's the third step. Feel without overthinking. This is where everybody that fails at this goes wrong. Oh, it's just my imagination. This is a coincidence. I really want this to happen. This can't be. Reject, overthink. Right. And that's where it fizzles out, because you create an energetic block. But once you get through that, then you go to trust the message. Now, I have to add something about trust. We live in crazy times. There are people who think that spirits, some type of spiritual entity tells them start an insurrection, put on a bomb vest, blow up a bunch of people, do all sorts of insane, horrible things. Right. Messages from spirits, messages from the divine are never about anger, bigotry, hatred, or violence. Those are messages coming from someone's ego, right, where you edge God out. Messages from spirits are about love, healing, protection, resolution. Yes. That's the difference. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. They're all very, very positive. They're not all hate and kill and all that. It has nothing to do with God. That has nothing to do with the teachings of Jesus. Right. That has to do with people finding a moral justification for their own ego-driven desires. And therein lies the difference. So when messages from spirits are genuine, because they do. They make people feel uplifted. Now, some people, no matter what, they're going to twist a message. I remember I did a reading for this woman, and her boyfriend had taken his own life. And he came through, and I could tell that he was not dealing with a full deck when he was here. Now, as a spirit, he's free of all that. And I said, I keep seeing a man staring through a window. And she said, well, my boyfriend, he was schizophrenic, and it was intensifying. And he used to come and stare through our windows at night when we were sleeping. All right, now this is like, macabre, scary stuff. Right. And he explained to her that his last act of heroism was he had to take his own life because he knew he was going to kill her and kill her son. And he explained that this surge was like, it was kind of like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing.
Sure.
Like the Mr. Hyde was coming up. And he said that he, you know, and here's the thing, when I talk about this, I am not justifying suicide in any shape, form, or fashion. This was this particular case. And he felt that if he didn't take his own life, he was going to kill her. And he wanted her to understand that he said that while I still had some control over my life, and she confirmed that the mental illness was intensifying and increasing. Okay. So I deliver this message. I get a call from her a week later. You know, that made me feel terrible because now I feel that it's my fault that he killed himself. So, and she's like getting all angry at me. And it's like, look, I told you what he told me. It was not your fault. I said, well, would you feel better if he would have murdered your son? You know,
right?
Would you feel better if he would have murdered the both of you and then took his own life? He said that nothing was going to stop the degenerative condition of his mental status. He was going to commit murder, and the only way to stop it was doing this. Now, of course, she said, well, we tried to get him, you know, committed and his family and everyone, and then nothing happened. The system failed us, you know, and that was a very, very difficult situation. And for those of you that are listening, this is part of the burden and the responsibility that people like Christy and I must carry, okay, because it's our job to objectively and without editorializing transmit the information. This guy, I thought, I mean, my impression of him was he said, this is my last act of heroism. He was a hero, okay? He was going to commit murder of her and her son, but instead, she overthought, overanalyzed it, and turned it into, well, then it's my fault he did this. If it wasn't her, it would have been somebody else.
Right.
So what's your take on that, Christy?
Well, absolutely, Mark, is that, you know, we're just the messengers, right? And humans have a tendency to overthink these things. In that case, that gentleman, he would have killed someone else, and he would have been torturing himself. He was not getting better, right? And so, yes, last act of heroism, we have to take that to the bank. If that's what the message they're giving you, that's the message that they want to relay to their loved ones. And so, you know, sometimes it's hard. And you and I, we have to interpret these things, don't we?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what is that? 2 snakes? What the heck? What is that?
Yeah. You know, and suicide is, you know, my best friend. You know, suicide touches all of us.
Right.
All of us.
Right.
Okay. It could be a friend, could be a family member. Everyone's affected by suicide. And it's an extremely complex behavior. And it's real easy for people to, oh, well, he committed suicide, so he obviously, you know, and it's like, before we race to judgment, you know, people that are suicidal believe that they are in a hellish reality from which there is no escape other than cessation of consciousness. Think about the people in 9/11 that were jumping out of the Twin Towers.
Right.
Now, those folks went to work that day, and none of them wanted to die that day. But suddenly, they were faced with one of two. They were going to die no matter what. And the choice was die from being incinerated in a roaring fire or jumping to your death. Now, neither option is palatable. But the people that jumped realized it would be over within seconds and relatively painless, or, you know, totally painless, as opposed to being burned alive. Right. Now, for people who are so depressed or who are suffering from mental impairments or mental health issues, right, they feel just like those people, that there's no way out but cessation of consciousness. And for those of you who may be feeling that type of depression, you have to realize you're not alone. There is 24-hour suicide hotline. There are trained professionals, people who care. People don't work for those hotlines for money. They do it because they want to help. And so if you are depressed and you are feeling alone and isolated, realize help is always a phone call away, because nobody should be in that situation. You know, that poor guy, that was looking through the windows and all that, he knew that he was losing his sane, conscious self to an actual disease. And when you look at a brain of a schizophrenic versus a healthy brain, it actually looks different. It is an organic difference. It is a real disease. And mental health, people, and the theme of the show is healing. All right, mental health is a huge component. People, snap out of it. Robin Williams. I mean, God, did I love, I loved all of his movies. Okay. He was great. I mean, Mrs. Doubtfire, the genie in Aladdin. I mean, you can just go down the list. He said, people don't fake being depressed. They fake being okay.
Yeah.
And so you should not have to go through this alone. Right. Don't. That's the time to reach out for help.
Well, and Mark, you know what? That's why I do the work that I do, and that's why I set out doing the work that I do, is because I want people to know that they're never alone. You have an unending stream of other consciousness that is with you in the terms of angels and guides, our loved ones, right? We're never any of us alone. But yes, if we're feeling in the physical like we're alone, know that first of all, you're not. And second of all, help is literally a call away. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so important if you're suffering to reach out, and everybody has those days where you just feel like, I just can't take any more, and, Mother Teresa was now Saint Teresa of Calcutta. Mm-hmm. She said, God never gives me more than I can handle. Right. I just wish that God didn't trust me so much. And isn't that wonderful? I mean, think about it, and Mother Teresa actually went through years of doubting the existence of God.
That's right.
Mother Teresa. So for people who are doubting, doubt is part of the journey. How can you have faith without doubt? And if you feel that you're doubting or you feel that you're depressed, well, then you're in good company. Okay. A lot of really wonderful people were all at, literally the end of their rope. And sometimes, they let go, and other times they hold on. So that's why healing is so important. And Chrissy asked me when we started, what theme do you want? Healing. Healing comes in 4 different levels. Physical, obviously, we have to take care of ourselves, eat right, get some exercise, listen to your healthcare provider, even though we don't want to hear what he or she may have to say. Right. But physical, emotional. Sure, everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants to be respected. Okay. But emotional health is extremely important. And sometimes, people say, I want love. Well, make sure you give love. Okay. Emotional, mental health. And we've been talking about that quite a bit. Mental and emotional health oftentimes overlap, but all 4 of these are interconnected. And then there's spiritual healing. Physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And when one of those is out of alignment, it affects the rest of them. But when one is out of alignment, that means the 3 others may be stronger. So you have to bring yourself into alignment. Spirituality. What is being spiritual? It's so funny. People come up to me and go, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. I say, well, what does that mean? I don't know. Well, it may sound good coming out of a fortune cookie, but you should be able to mention that. And there's a lot of people say, well, I'm not religious. Well, I don't want to get into, casting stones at religion, but for many people, being a member of a religion is that guide to their spiritual connect. They need the sense of community. They need, their scriptures, and that's fine. For other people who feel that they don't need that, spirituality doesn't mean just going around going, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. It means essentially treating people the way you wish to be treated.
Yes.
Okay. People oftentimes confuse God with religion. God exists in spite of religion, not because of a religion. Gandhi once asked, there's these Hindus and Muslims are quarreling, our religion is right, yours is about it, and all that. It's the same thing here in this country. There's only one way. And it's like, and Gandhi asked a group of people one time, what religion is God?
Mm-hmm. And the Dalai Lama said, kindness is my religion.
And the Dalai Lama is right about that. He also said something very fascinating about forgiveness. And forgiveness is a key component to emotional and mental and spiritual healing. Mm-hmm. Forgiveness is the most difficult of all virtues. Forgiving another person is very difficult. Forgiving ourselves is very, very difficult. But the Dalai Lama said, when you forgive somebody, go up to them, look them in the eyes and say, I forgive you. Then turn and run as far and as fast away from them as you can. Because his point was that when you forgive someone, that doesn't mean they get a free pass for being horrible to you.
Right.
What it means is because anger and resentment and hatred requires commitment. He's saying you let go of that commitment to these negative emotions, because forgiving someone is healing for you. Doesn't mean that person gets a free pass. And it also doesn't mean you have to put up with their dysfunctional and their bad behaviors. So you forgive somebody and then you withdraw from that.
Absolutely. Because holding on to that resentment is like drinking poison and wanting the other person to die.
Exactly.
It doesn't do anything to them, only it harms us. And so letting that forgiveness happen doesn't dismiss what happened, doesn't say, don't mind me, you do whatever you want to do. Not at all. But it just means that when we think of that, we don't have that negative charge anymore.
I'm a movie buff, and I don't know if you've ever. Did you ever see the movie Cleopatra that starred Elizabeth Taylor?
No, not completely. No.
Oh, there's a scene towards the beginning where Cleopatra, aka Elizabeth Taylor, she's doing something, and one of her servants comes up, and she goes to give her a cup of wine, but wipes her mouth, and one of the other servants goes, "Why'd you wipe your mouth?" And what it was is she was being hired by Cleopatra's brother to poison her. And she goes, please, forgive me. And, Elizabeth Taylor did such a great job with this. She goes, I forgive you. Now drink it.
Yeah, that's a little extreme.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
Yeah, it was.
Well, what I love about the work that you do is that, sometimes we have loved ones who pass where we haven't had that forgiveness. We haven't had that closure with them. And then we can still experience it, even though they've passed, right? Whether we've done something boneheaded against them or they've done something boneheaded against us. And we have that opportunity to have that closure and to have that healing that happens.
Absolutely. But yes, forgiveness is one of the healing components of spirit communication, love, healing, resolution. Yeah. But it's always best to practice what Jesus do unto others, treat other people the way you want to be treated. Buddha said, don't do to other people what you don't want done to you. It's the same thing, just, in a different form. Dalai Lama, my religion is kindness, because it's a lot easier to get forgiveness, to extend and receive forgiveness in the material world than it is from the other side. But let me tell you something. The forgiveness from the other side is such an empowering factor. And, from the medium standpoint, because, like Christy and I, we're the observers. I mean, we're facilitating all this, but boy, doesn't it feel good when we're able to transmit those messages and you can actually see the reaction for somebody, if some of that weight comes off of them. And, so that's definitely one of the joys. One of the joys, privileges of being able to do this.
Yes, it is such a privilege to be able to do this. And I'll hear from people sometimes, I went to this other medium who said, my father is so angry and so resentful. And I'm like, that can't be right. I do not see anyone angry on the other side.
Those are either fraudulent mediums or they're inexperienced and not very knowledgeable, because what they could be doing is a spirit could come through and what he or she is doing is transmitting identifiers. And in this world, they were angry and miserable and critical. And so an inexperienced meaning, they're still like that, but they're not understanding what they're getting. The other thing that just drives me to distraction. This one medium told me that there's a negative entity that's attached itself to me, and that's why my life is so miserable. And it's like, well, show me somebody whose life is just wonderful, someone who's never been touched by grief, death, illness, sadness, financial upset. Spirits don't attach to you. What you have to look at is that life is filled with lessons, and lessons will be repeated until they are learned. And so when these terrible things happen to you, they are always an opportunity to teach you something. And sometimes how we react to something horrible, like a child dying. I mean, that's just the absolute worst, most crushing loss of all. So now your lesson is, how do I react to that? Well, I suppose you can start developing a fentanyl or a cocaine habit and start drinking very heavily. You could start acting out sexually or another type of criminal way. Or perhaps you could begin to explore your spirituality, and you could learn to become more compassionate and understanding. So these things are going to happen to us no matter what.
Right.
It's how do we react to that is the measure of how we learn and grow and heal.
Yes, absolutely. The theme of the day is healing. Absolutely. We could go on and on about this, Mark, because you have so many wonderful stories. You've been doing this for years and years. You have amazing things that you're doing. So you've got your books. Can you run through the titles of your books again, please?
My books are Never Letting Go. That's my first book, which is a guide on the journey through grief. Evidence of Eternity, which bridges the gap between the spiritual and the scientific, and the Afterlife Frequency, which is the scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. And then I'm a writer for Best Holistic Life magazine. Subscribe for free online at bestholistic.com. I do a weekly live stream show every Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain, 4 p.m. Pacific, but it streams worldwide, called The Psychic and the Doc. And my co-host is Dr. Pat Baccilli. She's a world-renowned behavioral psychologist. We have a great time, and we take calls from listeners. So you can find out about all these things and about signing up for my newsletter to keep up to date by visiting my website, afterlifefrequency.com. You can find out about scheduling a reading with me by subscribing to my newsletter. It'll keep you up to date on things that are coming up and where I'm going. I've got a number of speaking engagements this year. I'm the keynote speaker at the 2022 Helping Parents Heal Conference in Phoenix, Arizona in August. In September, I'm the keynote speaker at the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And then in October in Virginia Beach, I'll be at the Edgar Cayce Center for Research and Enlightenment, the Ancient Mysteries Conference, will all be presenting Sacred Astrology, the mystical magi and the mystery of the Star of Bethlehem, and how astronomers and astrophysicists believe they have discovered what it was.
That is, like I said before, how do you sleep? When do you sleep? My God, you are a busy, busy man. I am so honored that you had time to sit down and talk with little old me. So, Mark,
my pleasure.
Thank you so much for being part of this, and we will I would love to have you on again.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Christy, and to all the listeners. Namaste, God bless you, and please keep tuning in to Christy.
Thank you.
Radiate Wellness is an international community of holistic and alternative healers dedicated to helping you create spiritual, energetic, and physical well-being. To learn more about our practitioners, services, classes, and events, or to schedule an appointment, visit us at radiatewellnesscommunity.com.